Welcome to Category Visionaries, the show dedicated to exploring exciting visions for the future from the founders who are on the front lines building it. In each episode, we'll speak with a visionary founder who's building a new category or reimagining an existing one. We'll learn about the problem they solve, how their technology works, and unpack their vision for the future. I'm your host, Brett Stapper, CEO of Frontlines Media. Now let's dive right into today's episode. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Category Visionaries. Today we're speaking with Cody Simmons, CEO of DermaSensor, a health tech company that's raised $36 million in funding. Cody, what's going on?
Not much. Excited to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Of course, really excited to have you as well. Let's go ahead and talk about everything that you're building there at DermaSensor.
Sure. Where do you want me to start?
Take us back to the very beginning.
All right. So the company was actually founded in 2009. The technology, 2 of our 4 issued patent families are licensed from Boston University. So the technology was really developed there. We did some early proof of concept studies with large 30-pound microwave-sized devices. So that's before my involvement. A couple very successful medical device entrepreneurs and investors. One, Dr. Maurice Ray, who's on the board of trustees at BU, where we went to medical school, kind of connected with the professor there that developed this field of spectroscopy. So that's kind of how the technology originally kind of got off the ground, some proof of concept work, a couple, part-time consultants helping with data collection. And when there was promising proof of concept data, first for melanoma and then for all 3 common skin cancers, that's when, to quote Maurice, he said, when I met him 9.5 years ago, he said, we're looking for someone to help turn our research project into a company. And so, my background's in bioengineering and also entrepreneurship. After Brown undergrad, I was at Stanford in a biomaterials lab doing a master's research there. And then Genentech, which is a big oncology company. And this is the 3rd medical device startup I've been a part of launching, the 2nd as co-founder. So I was really excited to join them, particularly because I had my first biopsy as a teenager. My mother and aunt were both diagnosed with melanoma, fortunately early stage, easily treatable. But it was definitely, I'd done a lot of work in oncology already. And this was one that was particularly hit close to home. So I was very excited to join Maurice, Chris Dewey, and David Matlin and building this company.
So you joined. What do the first 6 months look like?
First 6 months, really coming up to speed on the technology. I spent a lot of the time, a couple of trips to Boston in their lab, really trying to understand the tech and the path toward miniaturizing this. And I quickly realized that I had an engineering background, but I never professionally been, product engineer, done hardware, mechatronic development. So quickly realized this is more complex than we originally thought. And we definitely need someone internally that knows hardware development and miniaturization, and to work with optics groups that really have the kind of expertise to work with. So that was kind of the first 6 months, that licensing deal with BU and our first meeting with the FDA to figure out kind of the development path needed. Those were kind of the key priorities early on.
And if we just zoom out here, let's imagine that you're talking to a grandmother. How do you explain the technology in very, very simple terms?
Yeah, good point. And I'll describe what it's for too. I realized I haven't actually shared what we do. So we developed a very easy to use and low cost skin cancer triage tool. So basically, I can demo it later, but point and click the device on a lesion from when you pick it up to when you get a result. It takes less than 30 seconds. So very quick and easy to use to provide an immediate objective result for skin cancer risk. So that's never before been possible in healthcare in America, right? You've never been able to ask your, family doctor, internal medicine, OBGYN, hey, what do you think about this mole? Is this maybe concerning for skin cancer? Should I go see a dermatologist? And they actually scan it or test it for skin cancer. That's just never been possible. The standard of care today has been they eyeball it. They visually assess it. And by definition, they're not specialists. They're not expert in doing so. So, they do their best estimate or assessment. But, most non-dermatologists just receive 2 to 4 hours of training in medical school on how to assess suspicious lesions, whereas dermatologists, hundreds or thousands of hours of experience. So that's really, we have 7 published studies, and 2 of them specifically showed that the device is as accurate as in-person dermatologist assessments for a given suspicious lesion. So kind of we're bringing non-specialists, kind of upskilling them to be able to detect skin cancer more effectively and avoid unnecessary referrals and biopsies as well.
And then how do you do that? How does the technology work behind the scenes?
Sure. To go a bit more on the tech, yeah. So it uses a type of optical spectroscopy called elastic scattering spectroscopy. So we're actually pulsing hundreds of wavelengths of light into the skin tissue. measuring the reflectance of various cellular and subcellular characteristics. So the same things out of pathologists. So if you had a biopsy of a mole, right, maybe a few millimeters deep, kind of cut out a little chunk of it, send it to a pathology lab, they slice it up, stain it, and a pathologist, typically a dermatopathologist, would look at that under a microscope to diagnose it. The cellular and subcellular structures and content in that tissue, they're looking at under a microscope reflects light differently to their eyeball. That's how human vision works, right? So, we see in 3 wavelengths. So we're, okay, these cells have a large nucleus, various nuclei that are larger, melanocyte density, presence of condensed chromatin. There's these signatures of cancerous cells, and those reflect light differently to the eyeball of the pathologist under a microscope. They also reflect light differently to the device. And so I think that's what's so exciting and powerful about the technology. We're not, taking a photo of the visual appearance of the lesion or mole that doctors can already stare at. We're actually assessing cellular level content, the same thing that pathologists use to make a definitive diagnosis. And so I think that's why kind of we're the first and only available tool of this kind in the United States.
So for those who aren't in the healthcare industry, what does it look like just from a regulatory perspective to be able to sell something like this in the United States?
Yeah, that's a fun question. So in the pharma world, people are probably familiar with the parlance kind of, there's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 studies. Phase 1 is getting to feel like, is it safe? And then phase 2 is, okay, it's safe. Let's do different dose ranges to try to get a sense of, is it effective? And then phase 3 is typically the 2-armed RCTs kind of demonstrating it's better than the control. So devices are typically different. Obviously, an implant is very different than a disease detection device like ours. Obviously, there's some kind of safety study or assessment that's done, but really you want to validate the device, kind of show what its performance is and or show how it's impacting clinical care. So that's called a clinical utility study. And so you agree with the FDA on what kind of studies you need to do and then submit to them to show the device is safe and effective. And that's, how is it determined to be safe and effective? If you're the company, you can come up with whatever rationale you want. But if you're a moderate or a high risk device, you have to submit that information to the FDA. They're called class 2 and class 3 devices. And if they don't agree with you, then you're back to the drawing board, starting new studies, figuring out what to do. So the approach that most companies or most successful companies take is you do what's called an FDA pre-submission meeting, which is, okay, here's what we're planning to do. If we do that and achieve X, Y, Z, would that be sufficient to demonstrate safety and effectiveness? So we ended up having 5 pre-submission meetings because, for a product like this that's never existed in primary care before, there's lots of things to sort through and kind of align with them on before this is, available to hundreds of thousands of doctors and changing cancer care for potentially, millions of patients is our hope.
This show is brought to you by Frontlines Media, a podcast production studio that helps B2B founders launch, manage, and grow their own podcast. Now, if you're a founder, you may be thinking, I don't have time to host a podcast. I've got a company to build. Well, that's exactly what we built our service to do. You show up and host, and we handle literally everything else. To set up a call to discuss launching your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. Now, back to today's episode.
If I remember right from what I've read about the different phases with drug trials, isn't it something insane? Like it's over $1 billion to get one through, or maybe it was more on average. And also like 95% of them never make it to phase 3. I don't know if those numbers are right. Is that actually correct?
Yeah, they are. And that's actually the more conservative estimates that just look at like direct spend on studies. When you actually consider all the failed ones, the cost of hiring people to actually manage studies and plan them and oversee them. And yeah, I think the pharma industry's estimates, I think, are 4 to 5 billion. Yeah, academics estimates typically cut out a lot of that. But yeah, medical devices are typically much lower cost. So we've spent about $27 million on R&D.
Wow.
To make it to market. Yeah. So not $1 billion, but
a lot of money.
But yeah, no, still a lot of money in a long time. I'd say the first half of the 8 years are really more on product miniaturization, some data collection and to train the algorithm. And then the next few years, really on we've done 15 studies in total now. And 6, I think by the time we submitted to the FDA, we're at 12, and 6 were submitted to the FDA.
As a consumer, I generally don't like regulation, but I feel like for this type of stuff, it's good that there's some barrier to entry. I like that there's a $27 million price tag or some type of price tag that,
Yeah, I mean,
you know,
and that's they've done studies because there's a lot of kind of like, oh, take a picture and on smartphone and algorithm analyze it. It's like, well, what kind of hardware are you using? Phones have different cameras. Like, what about skin of color? What if hair is in the way? And there's studies that have shown major issues. Memorial Sloan Kettering published a study showing smartphone-based, skin cancer detection tools have about a 30% detection rate for melanoma. So super scary. Yeah, the FTC actually shut down some that were illegally marketed on the App Store a few years ago. And there's actually some that have kind of bubbled back up there. Because, one does it, doesn't get shut down. Then a couple others like, oh, maybe we can do it. Like, oh, if we had disclaimers, like you can't have a medical device and just have a disclaimer and potentially be killing people and not be fine. So yeah, every once in a while, the government, it kind of bubbles up enough to where they take action.
do you remember Silicon Valley? Did you watch the show?
Yeah, I love
No,
that
hot
show.
dog. That's what I think of a lot of these apps.
Hot dog night, yeah. Hot dog night. Yeah.
From a go-to-market perspective, when did you actually begin to even have a go-to-market strategy? Because I'm guessing if you have to wait for approval, like how much go-to-market work can you actually do?
Yeah, it's all kind of planning purposes, right? So you talk to, your planned customers, you have medical advisors that give you input on things. You talk to experts in reimbursement to kind of understand, are the studies we're doing for FDA also going to be satisfactory for insurance companies? How does that work? And, you have to align your plan, like your commercial plan with your study. It's called your indication for use, like who's actually approved to use the device for what purpose. So you have to do a lot of that work years in advance, right? Then you kind of head down, you do all the studies. And then after the studies, as you're working through FDA submission and the approval, you start kind of better refining, well, what should exact marketing messaging be and pricing and, do kind of at risk before approval, start hiring and building up the commercial team. That's the decision for company leadership and board, right? So that's kind of the process in our world.
And how have you approached that then? When did you start building out that team?
Yeah, so we had some commercial leadership on, a chief commercial officer. We're hoping it'd be a year before clearance. Ended up being a bit over a year and a half before clearance because things dragged out. But yeah, so kind of thinking through some of that product market fit. You're allowed to have discussions with physicians and health systems, but for feedback purposes, you can't. It's like, oh, it's this price. Do you want to buy one? We'll send you an agreement. That's, I forget the exact legal term, but you're basically selling a non-cleared medical device, right? So
yeah.
Hence that. But yeah, you can kind of get feedback and refine your plans. And then, our head of marketing, so that was our CCO, mainly sales background. Our head of marketing joined 3 or 4 months before clearance. So to make sure we kind of came out of the gate strong with marketing collateral, PR, and we did a great job on it. I mean, we were on segments with ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, covered in Forbes, Reuters, Stat. And then at the end of the year, at the end of 2024, we're on Time Magazine Best Inventions of the Year list, Fast Company Next Big Thing in Tech, the Healthcare Technology Report, Top 100 Healthcare Technology Companies. And I think because of that visibility, the many studies and publications, we've seen really fast kind of uptake, especially with private practices. We have several health systems as customers already too in our first year, but private practices, because they make decisions so quickly. It's 1 or 2 doctors that run the practice. Like, oh, this looks great, clinically makes sense, financially makes sense, we'll sign up. So that's really been exciting how quickly hundreds of private practices have already come on board just a year.
What did the PR engine look like that made all that media coverage happen? Did you bring someone in-house? Did you work with an amazing PR firm?
Yeah, you know what? I think honestly, just the FDA clearance itself was so big, just the nature of the device. Skin cancer is the most common cancer. There's never been a tool like this. So we did work with the PR firm, just kind of independent consultant to help with some stuff. But yeah, I think the FDA clearance itself really ended up grabbing a lot of attention. I think sustaining some of that coverage was a bit more challenging. We definitely got a big boost again with that, with winning some of those awards at the end of 2024. But yeah, no, we maybe got a bit lucky in that we did not make a big kind of external PR firm, super well-connected PR firm. We did not bring on a company like that. But our internal marketing team and with this consultant, we're still able to get tons of great visibility.
Whenever I bring founders on who've taken a company public, I always ask them what IPO day was like. So for you, I'll ask you, what was clearance day like? How do you celebrate that awesome news that you've been working so hard to reach?
Yeah, clearance day. I mean, with, near certainty, maybe It's like 3 to 4 weeks in advance, because once you enter, it's called labeling discussions, where you and the FDA start working through like the specifics. What are the precautions and warnings and what's the exact wording and the indication for use? They plan to clear it, right? So unless something got held up at senior management or some weird curveball. But yeah, no, the day itself was quite wild, especially because I was at the largest medical device biopharma conference of the year. It's called JP Morgan. They put on a big conference in January. And so I remember, yeah, in San Francisco, exactly. Yeah. So it's a couple weeks into January. We were cleared on January 12th. And the conference ended, I think, on Thursday. Set a flight, or Friday or something. I set a flight back Friday afternoon. And that was the target for FDA's timelines. That was the last day to be able to like clear the device and meet their timeline target. So I remember with the FDA team, I was like, yeah, I'm supposed to fly out tomorrow, but they're like, change that flight. There was many back and forth in calls with some FDA leadership up until, an hour before we received the letter.
This show is brought to you by the Global Talent Co., a marketing leader's best friend in these times of budget cuts and efficient growth. We help marketing leaders find, hire, vet, and manage amazing marketing talent for 50 to 70% less than their U.S. and European counterparts. To book a free consultation, visit globaltalent.co.
How insane does that feel to receive that letter? I guess
it was super exciting. Yeah, I mean, just on behalf of the team, all the work I put into it, all the, the investors that support us with tens of millions of dollars, it's a very heavy weight leading up to that. And the FDA is on strict timelines. So you only have certain periods to respond. So, I had my first 2-week vacation I've ever taken in my career. I was 35 at the time. I'm 37 now, and ended up working half of it because how the responses worked out. The ball was in our court at that time. So yeah, it was a pretty nuts period. I was working at the end, 100+ hour weeks. I got shingles during that. Yeah, kind of one of those things that you definitely never want to do again. In retrospect, it was an experience, but not one you want to relive.
I'm guessing there was no other way, right? That was the only option, only way through.
Yeah, I mean, or, you kind of hire more people earlier on and spend a lot more money and don't do it yourself. And I definitely kind of underestimated, how involved it would be. It ended up being over 10,000 pages, 6 clinical studies, 2 non-clinical studies. And, we had good consultants and team members involved, but it was a very heavy lift.
For founders listening in that are aiming to get clearance themselves, what advice would you have for them based on everything that you've learned?
Don't be a de novo or a PMA, because those are like the 2 highest regulatory categories. Class 2 510K is, so those processes are just way more involved and intensive. So yeah, at least to begin with, trying to figure out a way to not be in those highest, most intensive categories. But yeah, and definitely have people that they didn't necessarily need to be there at the beginning of the studies with you, but certainly at the end of the studies when the statistical analyses are being done and the study reports, and then those study reports are then summarized and rolled into the submission, and it's all sent to the FDA for, the consistency. And so you're not the only one or main one involved, and, being able to share that load with some other relevant people that bring helpful insights and expertise, and you double check each other's work and, make sure there's not unnecessary triggers that they like, whoa, wait, what about this? And kind of latch on to certain things. It's hard to have a consistent, strong, robust story across 10,000 pages of documentation. So, prepare accordingly.
From a marketing perspective, now that you have clearance, what's the high-level marketing strategy and marketing philosophy look like?
Sure. Well, definitely kind of the high-level awareness. I'd say part, digital, some traditional like medical conferences. And a big growth area for us is actually digital ads. So, our marketing team has been very successful, mainly Meta, also a bit with Google. And we've tried other things like LinkedIn and Reddit as well too, and like Doximity. But yeah, really getting the message out there, right? First in class, AI-powered skin cancer diagnostic tool, the only automated tool of any kind available for frontline providers, getting a lot of that messaging across to raise awareness and also obviously get adoption and sales has really been our main focus.
Do you have any pushback? Like, are there any people that don't believe this technology is possible? Is there anyone that stands to be disrupted when this does get adopted?
So minimal, because we've learned from a couple similar products that faced a lot of that pushback. So there's 2 similar devices that were approved just for dermatologists, just for melanoma. So we're the first for all 3 common skin cancers, and that can be used by non-dermatologists, physicians. And so the challenge with dermatologists is like, because there's a lot of, encouragement from investors, from dermatologists, like, oh yeah, they're the specialists. They do tons of procedures. They have a fair amount of money to buy tools like this to kind of go after dermatologists. But dermatologists, by definition, they're the experts. They're specialized in this. They're typically quite confident in how do they want to manage lesions because they are the experts. And the clinical gold standard is, you do a biopsy and you get the definitive diagnosis. So introducing some step before that can be tough. So yeah, some companies have spent literally hundreds of millions of dollars going after that. And there's a lot of buzz and excitement, and then commercially immediately fizzled out and nosedive immediately within, 2 to 4 years, something like that. So we kind of luckily saw that and kind of learned from that. Like, we're going to go upstream where the PCPs don't view themselves as experts, are welcome to get some second opinion, and they don't have the option of, I'll just, most of them aren't doing surgical biopsies, right? So that's not kind of there. So if they can get an immediate second opinion from a device, great. And so that was a lot of the early discussions I had, 8, 9 years ago. PCP's like, oh yeah, if I could pick up a device and easily get an opinion on what to do, that'd be great. Whereas dermatologists are like, well, why would I need that? I already know what to do. And, I'm already expert at this. Well, how is something going to make me better? So kind of went upstream, but you had to have a device very quick and easy to use and low cost. So that was our challenge, was developing that device.
What about on the fundraising side? So over 36 million raised to date. What have you learned about fundraising throughout this journey?
A lot. Yeah, for us, definitely have folks involved that are really supportive and aligned, with the mission and the vision, and will help you, good days and bad, definitely a couple of rough patches that we went through. Luckily, I'd say probably the best financing time, 2021, 2022, was when the company was in the most challenging position. And now the company's at the strongest now when the markets are in the worst position. So I guess that would be, if you had to pick, that'd probably be what you'd prefer. So I think we got a bit lucky in that stance. But yeah, having investors or advisors, board members that are really supportive and kind of opening their network and helping, and just, practice makes perfect. Got to do a bunch of pitches, a bunch of meetings, and figure out what resonates and actually take their feedback into account. I think a lot of founders kind of like, this is my plan, I'm doing it. And it's like, well, the investors you're talking to, they typically know their stuff. That's why they're investors in this space. And they see tons of different companies and challenges. So think about their feedback and why they're giving it. And B, if you can't raise money, your company's not going to exist anyway. So you can be as hard-headed as you want about, well, here's my plan, but if no one actually invests in it to support you bringing it to market, then you have no company and product. So also taking account from that perspective practically.
And if we look ahead now, the next 12 to 24 months, what are you excited about? What's coming? What's the plan?
Yeah, for us, really the main focus is scaling sales. We have several health system paying customers already. A couple have already indicated they want to move forward with full deployments at their health system. We're excited about that. So getting that process started. And obviously we have many kind of in the process. 2 of them are actually in the process of contracting that are 2 of the largest health systems in the country, but also continuing a lot of the broad adoption with small practices, right? So you kind of, especially we're focused in Florida, we have a couple of health systems here. Can we also get dozens or hundreds of private practices? So you kind of have that whole ecosystem. You have health systems using it, private practice using it, dermatologists are aware of it. They know what to do when they get a patient with a high-risk result. So that's really our focus for the next year and a half. And, some channel partnerships to help expand sales versus our, we just have a 6-person sales team. So how can we help support that?
Amazing. I love it. All right, man, we're going to wrap here. Before we do, if there's anyone listening in that wants to follow along with you in this amazing journey, where should we send them?
Yeah, they can go on our website. If you're a doctor, go on our website and sign up for a product demo. Any of our social channels. We have tons of Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn followers. That's really the best way to stay up to date. Our marketing team does a great job, sharing exciting updates and news on those channels.
Amazing. Cody, thanks so much for taking the time. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks so much, Fred.
This episode of Category Visionaries is brought to you by Frontlines Media, Silicon Valley's leading podcast production studio. If you're a B2B founder looking for help launching and growing your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. And for the latest episode, search for Category Visionaries on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.